Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Catalyze Yourself. I'm Gayatri, your host, and today we move into episode 22 of season 3 when boundaries feel like betrayal. This season, we've been slowing down to understand the conditioned patterns that can become active under pressure, each in its own way, and each capable of shaping how we think, feel, choose, and express ourselves before our conscious presence of mind has even fully entered the moment. The pattern we are staying with today can become especially difficult to accept because it may arise while we are making a choice that is honest, necessary, and aligned with the relationship we have with ourselves. In our journey of building a healthier relationship with our own self, our discernment can show us that we can no longer continue offering the same access, carrying the same responsibility, remaining available in the same way, or participating under the same conditions without moving farther away from ourselves. And once we know this, the next step of establishing that boundary is where internal and external pressures can start playing roles. Our emotions may carry guilt, grief, fear about what that boundary will mean to someone we care about. Our logical reasoning within our cognition may question whether we are being selfish, disloyal, unfair, or somehow changing the relationship after another person has come to depend on how we participated before. Our nervous system may prepare for disappointment, conflict, rejection, loss, or belonging. Our body may brace before the boundary has even been expressed. And this is where a healthier relationship with our own self can begin to feel like betrayal from inside of us. And when that boundary changes our availability, our role, the access another person has to us, what we will continue carrying, or the way the relationship has learned to function, the person affected may experience the boundary as a betrayal also. So, what exactly is a boundary? Because if we are not careful, it can become very much confused with control. At its healthiest, a boundary is the relational expression of our relationship with ourself. Our boundaries are the expression of our self inspiration that we called out in the SIRE model. And yes, the free resource overview for the SIRE model will be in our description as always. Self inspiration is our inner reference point that helps us remain connected to what allows our mind to choose in ways that are true for our own self. It is that part of our inner world that helps us stay in a healthy relationship with what matters, and the part of our inner world we lose connection to when we abandon ourselves. Self inspiration is what helps our choices remain connected to more than just an impulse or a reaction. It helps our mind stay connected and healthy with what we value, what we believe, what gives our life purpose, and our inner truth. So, in essence, our boundaries are not a tool to control another person. Rather, they help clarify what we can participate in and what we can continue offering, what we can remain available for, and what we can no longer carry without losing our own inner alignment and conscious connection to ourselves. Control attempts to narrow another person's available choices so the outcome remains acceptable to us. A healthy boundary acknowledges that another person retains their own choices while we retain responsibility for what our discernment shows us that we can participate in a healthy way. This means a boundary can exist while the connection remains. We can continue caring without taking responsibility for another person's choices. We may stay in a conversation while no longer accepting disrespect as the condition of staying in it. We may offer support without becoming the person who carries every decision. We may remain committed to work while changing a pattern of constant availability that our mind and body can no longer sustain. We may love someone and still recognize that love cannot keep asking us to absorb what is almost destroying our relationship with our own self. And none of this requires us to decide that the other person is entirely wrong, unsafe, uncaring, or unworthy of connection. Our boundary, when we approach it in a healthy way, speaks only to our participation. It does not need to become a verdict of another person's character. For a healthy relationship with ourselves and with others, boundaries make a more honest form of connection possible because the relationship is no longer being sustained through hidden depletion, private resentment, or the gradual disappearance of our self within it. Our boundary allows us to remain connected without treating the loss of ourself as the price of staying with it. And we know this. Starting a new relationship with your already established boundaries does not create as much pressure as when boundaries are newly introduced and established in a relationship that already has a history. Every existing relationship has a dynamic that is familiar. Each time we answer in the same way, take on the same responsibility, remain available at the same level, absorb the same kind of emotional strain, or smooth over the same disruption, we give that relationship information about how we participate. A single choice can be situational. A repeated choice can become part of that relational structure. If we consistently respond whenever someone needs us, our availability can begin to feel dependable. If we repeatedly carry the planning, the emotional repair, or the unfinished work, that responsibility can begin to feel like our role. If we remain silent when a tone or behavior affects us, the absence of response may be understood as acceptance. If we continually adjust our capacity so another person does not have to adjust theirs, the arrangement can begin to feel normal to everybody within it. And the other person may not even know what our participation has been costing us. We may not have known it clearly ourselves when the pattern began. We may have offered it willingly, believed that we could continue, or understood care and responsibility through the very role we have been performing. The relationship simply organizes around what is repeated and visible. The resentment we hold privately does not tell another person that what is being asked of us has become too much. Exhaustion that is hidden does not communicate that our capacity has changed. When our emotion, body, and our inner knowing, our layers of consciousness, carry information what our words and choices conceal, the relationship continues operating from an incomplete understanding of us. Because what started off as expectations now need to become an agreement that aligns with the health of ourself. An expectation can form because something has happened consistently. It may be understandable for another person to expect our usual response when that is the response we have repeatedly given in the past. Their expectation does not necessarily mean they believe they own our time, energy, or care. And because repetition teaches, the fact that we never stated a formal promise does not make their reliance imaginary or unreasonable. An agreement carries a different kind of responsibility. An agreement is a commitment that has been spoken, communicated, mutually understood, or relied upon in a way both people have begun to recognize. We may have agreed to share responsibility, remain available within a certain role, provide support under particular conditions, or participate in an arrangement that affects another person's practical life. When a boundary changes what has become familiar expectations, the relationship agreement may need to be communicated, reconsidered, and renegotiated. A boundary is the present clarification of what we can participate in now. To the other person, however, our boundary may be brand new information. They did not live inside of our body, our mind, our private process. They saw that, yes, they saw the availability, they saw how we moved through the role, the steadiness or the silence, only what was visible. They may have organized their own choices around what they had repeatedly experienced from us. What feels overdue within us can therefore feel abrupt within that relationship for them. And this is why a necessary boundary can carry the emotional weight of betrayal. And to understand that emotional weight more fully, we must spend some time with what the boundary changes inside of the person who is establishing it in the first place. Because our boundary is not only interrupting an expectation within a relationship, it may also be interrupting the identity through which we have learned to remain connected. For some of us, care may have become closely connected to availability, love to how much we are willing to carry, loyalty to staying, accommodating, understanding, or continue to offer the same access, even at the cost of ourselves. We may have learned that being dependable means not changing what another person could rely on, and that being a good person meant finding a way to keep giving without allowing our own limits to alter a relationship. When those meanings have been reinforced over time, our self talk may begin reminding us that we have allowed this before, that another person has come to depend on us, or changing it now is just unfair. What sounds like accountability may also just be a familiar role trying to preserve itself. One of the ways this can show up could be within a family where one person gradually becomes the one who coordinates care for an aging parent. The role may begin because they live closer, have more flexibility at that specific point in their life, or are simply the first person who steps in when something needs attention. No one may have formally assigned the role, and the person may have accepted it willingly. Repetition still teaches everyone that this is the role they can rely on and this person to carry. Over time, the responsibility may begin affecting their health, work, other relationships, or their ability to remain present with the parents that they are trying to support. Their discernment may show them that care now needs to be shared differently, that they cannot remain continuously available, or that certain responsibilities need to move to other family members. And still, expressing that boundary may feel like betraying the parents who need care, the family members who have relied on them, and the identity of being the one that holds everything together. Our conscious discernment may be clear, while our subconscious carries a very different conclusion. Connection is maintained by remaining available, absorbing disruption, carrying responsibility, and preventing disappointment. Our cognition can start building the reasons the boundary may be an unfair choice. Emotions, again, can bring in guilt, grief, fear, shame. Our nervous system may prepare for the loss of approval or belonging within the family, and our body may carry that preparation through stress, restlessness, or the urge to take back what we have not yet expressed. Guilt can be especially persuasive because it may carry more than one truth. It may show us that our choice has an impact, that an agreement needs to be renegotiated, or that we did not communicate something another person has every reason to know. And it may also be the emotional response our mind and body has learned whenever another person's disappointment placed our belonging at risk. But guilt alone cannot tell us what the boundary means. It needs to be understood within the full truth of what we are changing, why the change has become necessary, and what remains ours to own. Grief may be sitting right beside that guilt because even a role that depleted us may have carried belonging, purpose, and familiarity. We may be grieving not only what the relationship has been, but who we are and who we have known ourselves to be within it. This is where a necessary boundary can feel like betrayal from inside of us. Under pressure, we can become so focused on the possibility of betraying another person that we lose sight of what continuing under the same terms is asking us to disregard within our own relationship with ourselves. And because the relationship with the other person matters, returning to the old terms can begin to feel kinder than remaining aligned with what we have already recognized. Now let's look at how the same boundary can be experienced from the other side of the relationship. Their response may be shaped not only by the boundary, but by the discovery that the relationship contained an experience that they didn't even know was there. They may wonder why we did not tell them sooner, whether the care they relied upon was genuine, whether our earlier yes carried resentment that they did not recognize, or whether the relationship they believed they were part of is now being changed through information they're only hearing for the very first time now. In that family example we just walked through, the other family members may not experience the boundary only as a request to share care more evenly. They may experience it as responsibility arriving without preparation, while the parents' needs remain unchanged. Their work schedules, households, finances, or distance from the parent may have been organized around the pattern that already existed. What feels like an overdue redistribution to one person can feel like an unexpected withdrawal to another. Their cognition may search for an explanation that makes sense to them. Emotion may bring up hurt and anger and fear and grief and confusion. Their nervous system may register the changed access, availability, responsibility, or role as a loss of predictability, and their body may respond with agitation, stress, urgency, withdrawal, or the need for reassurance. The boundary may be about how we can participate now, while their inner experience may be asking whether the relationship still is secure. Recognizing this does not make us responsible for every meaning the boundary activates, though. It does allow us to remain compassionate enough not to dismiss their experience simply because our own discernment is now clear. Another person's hurt does not automatically invalidate our boundary, and the boundary being necessary does not make their hurt imagined or unreasonable or even manipulated. There may also be responses from others that do not respect the boundary we have expressed, where hurt, fear, or anger move into pressure, control, ridicule, punishment, repeated testing of that boundary, or attempts to restore the relationship to what it was before. Understanding the human experience beneath that response does not require us to accept behavior that asks us to surrender our dignity. And this is the complexity we lose when we decide too quickly that one person is protecting themselves while the other is simply entitled. One person may be trying to remain connected to their self, and the other may be trying to understand whether they are still connected to that relationship. Both may be responding to a loss of predictability, even though what each person fears losing is very different. And once those two experiences meet, the pressure within the relationship can intensify. The person establishing the boundary may feel that old pull to protect connection by accommodating. The person affected may feel the pull to restore what was familiar because familiarity is what previously signaled that that relationship was healthy and safe. A healthy relationship with ourselves does not remove our responsibility to consider the impact we have on others. Our intention may be aligned, and the boundary may be necessary, while the way we arrived at it, communicated it, or changed and established agreements still carries something for us to own. Acknowledging any of this does not invalidate our boundary. It allows us to see where our participation helped create the relational conditions now being changed. Maintaining a healthy relationship with ourselves does not make all of our commitments disappear. When our present capacity, values, health, or dignity asks for us to look at an agreement that can no longer continue as is, that relationship may require clarity about what changes now, what remains ours to complete, what transition is reasonable, and what the other person will need to now carry differently. For the person who has been coordinating that parent's care in the example we just walked through, this may mean sharing information that they carried privately so far, helping establish a new schedule, being clear about which responsibilities they can retain, and allowing a reasonable transition where one is possible. Accountability may ask them to participate in making the change workable. It does not require them to resume the entire role because the family feels unprepared for the redistribution. Establishing a boundary is therefore not complete just because we shared with those impacted. Self expression also lives in how we remain in the relationship with what our boundaries has changed. It can ask us to listen without becoming defensive, acknowledge that the boundary feels abrupt from the other person's experience, and allow disappointment to exist without rushing to argue them out of it. Their response becomes information we can consider, not an instruction that automatically replaces our discernment. We can understand why they relied on what we offered and why the changes feels like something is being taken away without agreeing that the former arrangement must continue. And this is where compassion and discernment needs to remain in the same conversation. Compassion allows us to acknowledge what the boundary changes for another person, while discernment keeps us connected to what continuing under the former terms has been costing our relationship with our own self. Holding both does not remove the discomfort from the relationship. It keeps us from resolving that discomfort by dismissing their experience or returning to the self abandonment that made that boundary necessary in the first place. And now, as we close this episode, let us go through some of our key takeaways. Today, we stayed with why a boundary that supports a healthier relationship with our own self can still carry the emotional weight of betrayal. For the person establishing it, The boundary may interrupt an identity shaped around care, availability, loyalty, or being the one who holds it all together. For the person impacted, it may change access, responsibility, support, or simply a familiar way of relating that they would have always believed would continue. We also looked at how repeated participation can form expectations and how those expectations may now need to become an agreement that reflects what we can honestly participate in now. What feels overdue within us can feel abrupt to another person because they did not live inside the private process that brought us there. And that difference in timing asks us to communicate clearly, own the impact of what we helped make familiar, and allow a reasonable transition where possible. It does not require us to return to a role or an arrangement that our discernment has shown us is no longer healthy for our relationship with ourselves. And now I want to invite all of us to sit with a few reflective considerations. Where in our relationships has what we repeatedly offered become an expectation that can no longer reflect what we can honestly continue? And can we remain consciously present with another person's disappointment without allowing that disappointment to become the authority over what our discernment has been showing us that we can continue carrying or not? These reflections, as always, simply invite us to notice whether our boundaries remain connected to our self inspiration while our self expression carries enough honesty, compassion, and accountability for what is changing to become clear within the relationship. If today's conversation resonated, I would love for all of us to remain connected in this work. Please share your reflections and experiences through the platforms where you're listening from or connect with me directly. And please do share this episode with anyone you feel may find value in joining us in this conversation. And in our next episode, episode 23, when our safety harms another, we will turn towards another conditioned pattern that can become active under pressure. We will stay with what can happen when the way we seek or protect safety for ourselves begin creating cost for another person, even when harm is not what we intended. And in some cases, harming another may be exactly what we intended. Thank you for joining me today. I'm Gayatri, your host, and I'm so grateful for the space we continue to share here. And until next time, let us keep allowing our discernment to clarify how we participate, keep communicating what has changed with honesty, and keep building relationships where connections does not require the loss of our own self.